What is going on, my YouTube friends? And I'm going to put them back where they go. And we're going to try to show you a little more. Boom, 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 boom. Up front, back, front. Okay, so we got all those pieces good, right? So now, a lot of times people ask which panels go to where, and we were talking about how we're going to show you in depth on the seat that wasn't already taken apart. With this one, I know the whole shebang is okay. I don't know. I had to look at the seat. I already did. With this seat, the way it's going to work is we want to do all the top surfaces and the front piece and then sew the sides on. And the reason you're going to do that is on this seat, which you'll see at the end, it actually has a seam that comes up and around it here, right? So if we were to sew these pieces together and then sew this piece on, it'd be really tough to sew that piece on because you'd have to actually cut the stitches back, put that piece on, sew it across, and then continue sewing it. So by looking at the original seat, I could tell that these pieces need to get sewn to this piece and then everything goes around. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to sew the top pieces together. Pretty simple. We'll sew all these together and this, and we'll see how that looks. Okay, so one of the things you never do in an upholstery shop is put shit on the sewing tables. I hate that because when you try to sew and move things around, it just hits everything. So let me move this. So you can see this is one of the reasons why I say never put anything on upholstery. I haven't even touched this yet. This is already on the ground, falling off. And all these pieces, see, there goes one right there. Just moving stuff around, it falls. And I can't sew. You cannot sew on a table without hitting stuff because you're moving your panels around. Face pens on the floor, Sharpies on the floor, rulers on the floor. Whew. Okay, so now we can finally get started. You can see all the little stuff that you have to go through that slows you down trying to do a job that doesn't need to be, I mean, it shouldn't even be happening. You should be able to come in, nothing on your tables, items on shelves, workbench clean, do your job, and not have to stop every 2 seconds to move stuff around. It's kind of irritating. Okay, so now we're sewing the nice relaxing part, right? Bada boom. I say that with joking. Okay, so I'm going to put the top stitch in here because it's had a top stitch down. And again, as we do these videos, we'll be doing deeper videos into certain things like stitch sewing and all that type of stuff as we go, but we're kind of just bringing you through a build process as we build vehicles. I kept putting it off because I wanted you to have a videos where we start and finish at the same time, or start and finish the full vehicle, but we just can't do it. We got to get stuff done. So we jumped you guys in right in the middle of it, and you're going to see what's going on. What's going on? So what you see is I took the back panel and the front panel, sewed those together first, because if I had sewn the sides on, right, if I started sewing this onto here, how would you put that on afterwards? So if this was already sewn, right, bada boom, bada bing, all the way up to here, and then you're looking at that piece hanging over with this piece, how would you sew that on? Not going to happen, right? We sewed this to this, and then we're going to put this, and do the front, because I believe the front's wider. Yes, so again, so this is another, for instance, if I was to sew this to this, right? If I was to sew this to this first, I did that, and this is all sewn, and you turn it inside out, and then you got to put this panel on, you're going to come to a stop point where you're going to have to actually cut your stitches and go back. That's what you're always thinking about, and it's hard to explain, but it is what it is. So let me sew this one out first up here. And this will actually be a good piece to show you something that I showed on one of our last videos on our motorcycle channel. Let me get this sewn and I'll show you. I just like to trim it when you're going to stitch over it. So there's, excuse me, less material built up. Now when we're sewing, you saw us put all those little lines in it. And I didn't put a lot of lines in this one. I apologize, but I've done so many of these things that sometimes I just do them. What ended up happening is I know on these seats, this matches with this and it's full length. If for some reason I started here and got here and it was too short or too long, I would know I messed up, but I didn't. Normally I put a mark here, which is the most important because you want your seams on both sides to match up. So let me sew this one in. Oh, actually what I was going to show you is this here. So remember I was talking in the previous about how you have that little tip that shows over. So normally you would just cut this, right? Technically in this case, if you pattern it, it would be fine because this should have lined up with this like it did. But what ended up happening is when you sew it, you want your stitch. You see, like a lot of people would worry, they would try to bend this to match that, but you really don't. You just want to make sure your butt seams are exactly where they need to be and they match up. So this one intersects, this vinyl intersects this vinyl 3/8 of an inch in on both sides, if that makes any sense. I know I'm struggling here to explain stuff. Now we're going to do this. I know this is the right size. And as soon as this is done, we're going to go test fit it. Another thing, I know if you watch our videos, again, I'm repeating myself, but you always, if you have to align pieces up, if you have your alignment marks, say there's one here and one here, and you want them to be here, don't try to pull that material. If you try to tug that material really hard, it's going to put a lot of pressure on one side and not the other, and that's what squishes down and gives you all the wrinkles that you'd have afterwards. I cut that, I forgot to trim that off a little bit, and this is pretty good. So we're going to do the little, I'm going to snip the corners, which actually, if you just watch me, we're talking about this, but I automatically snip those just because I don't want to have a lot of material built up when you're stitching over it, because then it has a chance or tendency to make the machine want to kind of step up and walk over it. So now that we did this, we got to put our front piece on. And so what I'm going to do with this piece is I have to check, because this one, I'm assuming it's symmetrical, but I don't like to assume, so let me check. Okay, so I don't need this, this, and this anymore. We know what we're doing. Okay, we have to put our Velcro on still, but I want to make sure. So this here, okay, so this is supposed to be symmetrical. So what I'm going to do, because we didn't mark it like we're supposed to, and this is actually showing you why it's so important to mark stuff, because if you haven't done this for a living, it's really hard to correct this. But when you work with people that mess up all the time, like over the years, you learn to figure out ways to double and quadruple check to make sure that everything's right. Now what I just did is I just made sure, I flipped them in half, made sure this is the center. I can see by my marks that the center lines up. So we're just gonna sew this to this. All right, one thing I wanted to show you, I'm about to test fit this so I know where to put the sides on. And this is why I'm double checking, quadruple checking everything we do. If I had taken the time and done the labeling properly, it probably would have saved me a little bit, just because having them moved added a little confusion. One thing I wanted to say, which I was going over, is so a lot of times when you sew a piece on, you see that like we're about an 1/8 inch off. The reasoning for that, when you think about it, and this is why I was saying how the seats kind of grow as you go. If they did a 1/2 inch seam allowance, right? A 1/2 inch seam allowance, and I use 3/8, and then say for some reason I don't pattern it properly, I do it at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now, when I sew in at 3/8 of an inch, I'm gonna have an 1/8 of an inch off on this side. But if I do the same thing on that side, then I have an 1/8 of an inch off on that side. So an 1/8 and an inch would be a 1/4 of an inch off, which would mean that when I got to the end, one of these panels would be either 1/4 inch bigger or smaller. So I'm at about almost an 1/8 here. So that means I was probably a 1/16 of an inch off from one side to the other. So I just trimmed this down a little bit. It's not gonna matter on this seat. We don't have like a groove that we're going into that we cut. And like on a high-end seat, sometimes you'll actually cut a groove out and you'll tuck a flap in there to pull that material in. And if it's a tiny bit off, everything shows up. But we're not worried about this. Is a factory seat that we're doing just a little bit of an upgrade to. So now what I gotta figure out is where the seat goes, right? So I'm gonna line up the center here. I know that goes there and that goes there. And then we need to mark, where's my little thing? Little chalky chalk. So now if I put that there, and now I can follow this on the seam. So I can see where the original seam was here. I wanna go in 3/8 of an inch for my seam allowance and go there. And then we're gonna put this here, and I am gonna make some marks here. Right? A lot of times I like to do this and mark exactly where that is. And then make sure that doesn't move. Everything looks good, except for I got to sew the flap on this side. So what I am going to do is we're going to use the little cheap clickers, because I can't find the expensive ones. And we're going to put our little marks in there, making sure that we cut less than 3/8 of an inch, because if we cut over 3/8 of an inch, we'll be putting a hole in our seat. And then we're going to do the same thing on here, right? So what we just did is just notch these. These notching upholstery notchers are in the link in the description below. These are the cheap ones. I do like the $69 ones better because they have a sharper point to them, but those are cheap. These are, the other ones are expensive. Okay, so now I knew that. So now what I'm going to do is just transfer this to this because knowing that it's symmetrical, I want to make sure that marks from this side and that side are the same. And what that means is this panel here will be in the exact same location. So you don't want to have this one here and then put the other one off here, because what will happen is this seam will be exactly here on this side, and then it can be here or there on the other side, which means this whole cover is going to be racked and it's just going to look hideous, and we don't want that. So let me put this on here. Bada boom, bada boom. Got those two. Clicker, clicker. So these guys on. So my goal for this week is to get this seat done and the carpet in. We already got the other seat done, well, and the armrest, so that next week we could just focus on the well, no, we get the carpet. Yeah, we get the other seat done, this seat done, center console, carpet in, and then next week we just focus on the audio, which would be great. So this one I'm noticing is slightly off in the start, but I want to make sure my V's align up, because that's the most important part. This material is so much tougher to work with because it's so firm and it doesn't stretch at all, but it's also such a, probably one of my favorite looking materials. It just doesn't like to lay flat. It's hard to follow edges, and I just want to make sure that everything lines up, which it does. Perfect. So that was a good call. Everything lined up. So that means, like I said before, we have all these, like this seam here could have been a 16th or 8th inch off, which would have led that one to be an 1/8 inch off. So I wanted to take care of that. And then I'm just going to go up to here. I'm going to stop it here. All right, so I was going to take you through, I just kind of went through and finished off. I put all the clips on here, put all the listings on here, got all that aspect of the seat cushion done. And I was going to take you to the next step and actually install them. But I think what I'm going to do is take you through step by step on the backrest to show you how time consuming it is to pattern and do everything start to finish, so you can see like the whole process. So I'm going to conclude this video here, and hopefully by the end of this week, you guys will have bunch of videos on this truck. Just got to get the work done and film at the same time, which is difficult.